What are you doing?
Stay back!
You're gonna get us both killed!
Almost got it.
Stop. Don't touch that line. The man's voice cut through the night, sharp, urgent, the kind of sound that doesn't belong in a quiet suburb at 2 a.m. But the HOA president didn't jump, didn't apologize, didn't even pretend. She was confused. She looked up from the utility cabinet beside the house. Bolt cutters already clamped around a thick wire. Her manicured hand tightened like she was clipping a ribbon at a grand opening. "Watch me," she said. And then, snap. The house went dark, not the whole street, not the neighborhood. Just that one home, like someone had surgically removed it from the grid. Inside, 20 feet away, the oxygen concentrator in the master bedroom went silent. No gentle hum, no steady mechanical breath, just nothing. A backup battery chirped too. Life then started screaming its warning, beep, the sound of time, bleeding out. 20 minutes. That's what it gave them. 20 minutes before a Korean War veteran who'd survived bullets and winter campaigns would start suffocating in his own bed because a woman with an HOA title decided rules mattered more than oxygen. The man, Marcus, ran. Inside so fast he nearly slipped on the tile. He didn't shout a lot in life, but that night he yelled his grandfather's name like it was a rope he could throw across darkness. Ezra Cruz was sitting up, eyes wide, lips pale under the dim bedside. Light? He tried to speak, but it came out as a thin, broken sound. His chest rose too quickly. His hands clawed at the blanket like he was trying to hold the world steady. The battery timer blinked down. 8 minutes. Marcus didn't cry. He didn't freeze. He moved the way trained people move in emergencies, fast and exact. He checked the tubing. He grabbed the backup tank. He forced his own hands to stop shaking because shaking wastes time. Then he sprinted back outside, rage packing his lungs. Like smoke, she was still there. Standing in front of the utility cabinet like she'd just finished a successful home project. Dusting off her hands, smiling that smug HOA smile, the kind that says, "You can't do anything to me. I'm the rules." Her name was Karen. Of course it was Karen. In the neighborhood she was Mrs. Pemberton, but behind closed doors. People called her what she acted like, the queen of paperwork and punishment. "Are you insane?" Marcus said. "That machine keeps him alive." Karen's expression didn't soften. It sharpened. "Medical equipment doesn't belong in residential neighborhoods," she said, like she was reading it from a laminated card. "This isn't a hospital." "He's a veteran," Marcus snapped. Karen shrugged, as if the word veteran was just another excuse people used to break her precious guidelines. Then he should be in a facility built for that, not in a place where families are trying to protect property values. Property values, that's what she said while a man inside was running out of minutes, and then she delivered the ugliest line of all. Quiet, sweet, and poisonous. Maybe next time you'll pay your fines on time. That's when Marcus learned what his grandfather's life was worth to her. A landscaping fine that didn't even cost $50. But Karen's little grin had a problem. She had no idea who she'd just targeted. Marcus DeLuca wasn't some exhausted caretaker who didn't understand systems. He was an electrical contractor in Phoenix with 12 years of field work and a past in the Air Force, rewiring critical equipment where failure meant death, not inconvenience. He knew wiring. He knew power distribution. He knew where pressure points were, and when you pick a fight with someone who understands pressure points, you don't get a normal war, you get a surgical one. People later asked Marcus what he felt in that moment. He told them the truth. Something old woke up in his chest. Not just anger, not just fear, a cold, steady promise. Because Ezra wasn't. Just his grandfather. Ezra raised him after Marcus's parents died in a crash when he was 8. Ezra was the man who taught him to tie a tie, throw a punch, fix a sink, keep his word. Korean War veteran. Purple Heart. The kind of man who stood for the anthem even when his knees cracked like dry wood. 3 weeks earlier, Ezra had been in the ICU at the Phoenix VA fighting pneumonia complications. Touch and go for nearly a week. The doctor had explained it without sugar. His lungs were scarred. He'd need supplemental oxygen at home indefinitely. So Marcus did what devoted family does. He bought a single-story ranch in a newer HOA community called Willowbrook Heights, 47 homes around a central park, streetlights, trimmed sidewalks, and a big gazebo nobody used. Annual dues, strict rules. Community standards? Marcus turned the master bedroom into what the respiratory therapist called a home recovery suite, a mini ICU. Oxygen concentrator, backup tanks, monitors. Everything approved, everything legal, everything built to keep a war hero alive. For months it worked. The oxygen machine's hum became their background music. Ezra's Old Spice cologne mixed with the sterile smell of tubing. Marcus took early jobs so he could be home by noon, help with therapy, and make sure the life support never missed a beat. And for a while, the HOA wasn't a nightmare. Under the previous president, an older woman named Sterling, things ran on common sense. Sterling had been a nurse. She understood medical equipment. She didn't treat breathing like a violation. Then Sterling moved into assisted living, and the neighborhood elected Karen. Karen was 52, divorced, lived alone in the biggest corner lot house with a view of the community park like she owned. The sun. She had a ruler-straight bob haircut and a tablet she carried like a weapon. Every conversation sounded like she was conducting an audit. Every smile looked practiced. Her campaign promise was simple: protect property values. Her first target was Marcus's landscaping. He'd planted desert willows and palo verdes, native Arizona trees that survive without guzzling water. Practical, beautiful, responsible. Karen fined him anyway. Non-approved plant varieties. Because in Karen's world, rules mattered more than logic. She wanted Bradford pear trees, trees that die in Phoenix heat and waste gallons of water. When Marcus tried to reason with her, she cut him off without blinking. The covenant specifies approved landscaping, she said. Environmental concerns are not my department. The fines multiplied like a disease, a noise violation, because Marcus's work truck started at 5 a.m., even though he'd been doing that for months. A commercial vehicle loitering violation because Ezra's oxygen delivery truck took 30 minutes to unload and check tanks, standard procedure for home oxygen patients. Then Karen crossed the line that made Marcus realize this wasn't about rules. One afternoon he caught her photographing Ezra through the bedroom window while he napped, oxygen cannula in his nose, tubing visible. The camera flash clicked in. The desert wind. When Marcus confronted her, Karen didn't even look embarrassed. Medical equipment creates noise violations, she said, tapping her tablet. The HOA covenant prohibits home-based medical facilities. That's my grandfather, Marcus said, jaw tight. He needs that to breathe. Karen's smile was pure ice. This is a residential neighborhood, not a hospital. People need to learn there are proper places for medical care. That was when Marcus saw it clearly. Karen wasn't just annoying, she was systematic. Document everything medical, escalate fines, force the family out, make it their choice because they couldn't afford to stay. Then she called an emergency. HOA board meeting with an email subject that sounded like a threat. Zoning violation threatens neighborhood safety. She attached a 12-page slideshow titled Unauthorized Medical Facility Documentation, photos of Ezra's concentrator labeled like industrial equipment. Backup tanks called hazardous materials, delivery trucks framed as commercial activity. Marcus walked into that fluorescent community room feeling like he'd entered a courtroom. Folding chairs scraped, burnt coffee stank. 12 residents sat, like a jury. Karen stood at the front like a prosecutor. A guy from city zoning sat there looking uncomfortable, checking his phone like he wanted to disappear. Karen clicked through her slides with calm confidence. We have a serious zoning violation, she announced, that threatens our neighborhood character. A retired nurse in the crowd tried to push back, saying the equipment was normal, quiet, safer than most appliances. Karen didn't care. We must follow legal guidelines, she said, not emotions. Marcus stood up with printed federal disability. Accommodation guidelines, voice steady. The Fair Housing Act requires reasonable accommodation for disabilities, he said. Federal law supersedes HOA covenants. Karen's expression flickered. Not fear, not yet. just irritation that someone dared speak in her courtroom. She tried to dismiss him, until the zoning guy finally muttered uncomfortably that federal disability law does override local restrictions. Karen cut him off and pushed the vote anyway. Her motion passed. Medical equipment must be moved to interior rooms, not visible from public areas. Deliveries limited. Approval required. The neighborhood basically voted on whether Ezra deserved to breathe comfortably in his own home. After the meeting, Karen walked up to Marcus with that predatory smile. "I understand this is emotional," she said, like she was giving a performance review. "But rules exist for everyone's benefit. You can find appropriate senior living facilities." In that moment, Marcus promised himself something. Quietly. He wasn't going to just complain. He was going to end her. Karen wasted no time. On Monday at 7 a.m., she appeared at his door with a toolkit like a professional inspector: tape measure, decibel meter, camera, tablet. She called it an official compliance inspection and waved a laminated card like she had federal authority. She circled the house, measuring and recording, like she was hunting a criminal instead of harassing a veteran. By Wednesday, violations arrived: medical waste accumulation, because empty oxygen canisters waited by the garage for pickup. Marcus installed security cameras. If Karen wanted to stalk, she'd be on record, and the cameras paid off fast. Thursday night at 11:06 p.m., motion alerts hit Marcus's phone. Karen in his backyard with a flashlight and measuring tape, creeping, documenting his windows, while Ezra slept 20 feet away. Marcus filed a police report. The officer listened, then gave the usual line: "HOA disputes are civil matters unless there's damage." Karen escalated anyway, fines jumping higher, violations coming faster. She was turning paperwork into a weapon. Then came the certified letter: emergency electrical hazard violation, immediate. Utility disconnection required. Karen claimed Ezra's oxygen equipment created a fire hazard due to electrical overload. She'd scheduled an emergency utility inspection for Thursday at 10:01 a.m., conveniently when Marcus would be on a job he couldn't cancel. Marcus read the clause she cited about emergency authority to disconnect utilities. He'd never seen it before. But Karen had convinced board members to sign off. He tried to prepare, tried to get ahead of it, but Karen didn't wait until Thursday. She waited until 2 a.m. when Marcus was across town doing an emergency repair. That night, his phone lit up with a call that didn't sound like a phone call. It sounded like panic. "Marcus." Ezra's voice was thin and shaking. "The power's out. The machine stopped. The battery says 18 minutes. Marcus broke every speed limit. When he slid into his driveway, he saw them. Karen, 2 board members, standing at the utility cabinet like they'd just finished a project, bolt cutters in hand. The wire severed. Only his house was dark. Every neighbor's porch light still glowed. The street looked normal, except the one home that suddenly felt like a sinking ship. "What did you do?" Marcus shouted. Karen looked up with the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "Emergency hazard requires immediate disconnection," she said. "Medical emergencies should be handled in appropriate facilities." Marcus rushed inside again. Ezra was struggling, eyes glassy. The backup timer blinked down. The oxygen saturation monitor screamed. Neighbors began stepping out in robes and slippers, drawn by shouting and darkness. Mrs. Patterson, retired nurse, ran over and took one look at Ezra. "Call 911, she ordered. "Now." Karen tried to protest, something about procedure, about board authority, about neighborhood safety, but nobody was listening anymore. Because they could see what was happening. They could see a war hero suffocating in his own bedroom, while an HOA president stood outside acting proud. Within minutes, the street turned into an emergency scene, ambulance lights painted red and blue across beige stucco walls. Paramedics rushed in, manually ventilating Ezra, while Marcus restored power as fast as he could. The air smelled like cut insulation and cold desert night. Karen stood near the utility cabinet, still trying to justify herself, still talking about property values while professionals fought to keep a man alive. That was when the mini twist hit. Mr. Kowalski, an older neighbor, pulled Marcus aside, face tight, phone in hand. "I've been recording her," he whispered. He played an audio clip, Karen's voice. "Clear as day. Make sure it looks accidental," she said in the recording. "We can't have documentation of intentional sabotage." Marcus felt his blood go cold. This wasn't just HOA harassment. This was premeditation. This was a plan. The EMT supervisor stepped out after loading Ezra into the ambulance and looked straight at Karen. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and deadly calm, "interfering with life support equipment can be a felony, and this man is a protected veteran." Karen's face finally changed. For the first time, the smug little smile cracked. The ambulance pulled away, and as the sirens faded into the desert distance, Marcus stood in the driveway holding two things that felt heavier than they should. One was Ezra's medical file. The other was Mr. Kowalski's phone with the recording that could bury Karen alive. And right then, Marcus didn't think about revenge in the way most people do. He didn't think about yelling or fighting or posting on Facebook. He thought about something colder, way to make sure Karen never touched another vulnerable person again, because now the question wasn't, how do you stop an HOA bully? The question was, what do you do when someone tries to kill your grandfather on purpose and leaves evidence? Marcus found the answer the next morning, buried in paperwork that had been sitting in a drawer the whole time, a clause in the original property deed, a clause Karen clearly didn't know existed, and once Marcus read it, he smiled for the first time in days, because it meant he could bring something into that neighborhood that Karen couldn't legally touch, something loud, something massive, something that would turn Karen's perfect little street into her worst nightmare, and it was. Already on its way, Karen didn't sleep. Nobody did. The whole neighborhood was buzzing, phones lighting up, group chats exploding, people replaying the scene in their heads, an HOA president cutting power while a veteran struggled to breathe. Karen tried to regain control the way she always did, emails, urgency, threats wrapped in concern. She sent a message before sunrise to all 47 residents, emergency safety update, medical equipment hazard. She attached more photos, more documentation, more nonsense about risk and compliance. She tried to turn attempted murder into a safety decision, but Marcus was already digging. He pulled out the home purchase papers and found the original deed language from decades ago, dry legal text that most people ignore, and there it was, a medical utility priority clause. An easement protecting life-sustaining equipment, permanent, enforceable, overriding HOA restrictions. That single paragraph turned Karen's rules into tissue paper. But Marcus didn't stop there. He used his contractor access and public records to do what Karen did best, document. Only he documented reality. He found a lawsuit tied to Karen's name from a previous neighborhood, disability discrimination complaints, patterns of targeting elderly residents, pressure campaigns that pushed families out. There were liens, unpaid judgments, a trail. He found something else, too. Connections to a real estate outfit that specialized in buying homes under market after residents were pressured by HOA enforcement. Karen wasn't just petty. She was profitable, and if Marcus could prove that in a way authorities couldn't ignore, then Karen wasn't facing a neighborhood argument anymore. She was facing federal consequences, so Marcus built a coalition quietly, not a loud neighborhood mob, an organized unit, the retired nurse, the older neighbor with recordings, the families, who'd been fined over ramps, medication deliveries, asthma machines, the ones Karen kept circling like prey. They all had stories, they all had receipts, and Marcus had one more move, one that would both protect Ezra and break Karen psychologically, because the deed clause didn't just protect equipment, it allowed emergency medical infrastructure necessary to ensure uninterrupted power for life-sustaining devices, and emergency medical infrastructure could include a hospital-grade generator, not a cute little portable one, a monster, a diesel unit designed for hospital wings and disaster zones, the kind that arrives on a long truck, takes up street space, needs clearance, and comes with legal protection under medical necessity, the kind that makes a quiet neighborhood sound like an industrial site. Marcus made one call. "I need your largest medical grade." "Backup generator," he said. "This is for protected life support equipment." The dispatcher asked if he understood the size. Marcus understood perfectly. The generator required a 53-foot delivery truck. It would idle. It would hum. It would be loud. And the best part? With the medical easement and federal protection, Karen couldn't remove it. Not with threats. Not with fines. Not with board votes. She could scream into the desert air until her throat turned raw. The generator would still be there. So Marcus scheduled the delivery. But Karen was spiraling. She called emergency meetings. She tried to bring in inspectors. She posted fear-mongering notices about hazards and property values. She tried to rally support by painting Ezra's room like a secret illegal clinic. It wasn't working anymore. Not after neighbors saw flashing ambulance lights and paramedics fighting to keep a man alive while Karen stood there acting proud. Then, Karen made her next mistake. She emailed a 48-hour ultimatum: remove medical equipment or face permanent disconnection. She set the meeting for Monday night, when she knew Marcus would be away again, and she assumed she could sneak back to the utility cabinet the moment everyone was distracted. Mr. Kowalski's camera caught her approaching the utility shed, late. That night, bolt cutters in hand, walking like she was on a mission, but when Karen turned the corner, she froze. Because there, blocking the entire utility access, already parked like an occupying force, was the generator truck, enormous, diesel idling, emergency strobes painting the street in red and blue like a disaster scene, and the tech standing beside. It didn't look like an HOA-friendly delivery guy. He looked like someone who'd wired hospitals during hurricanes. Karen stood there, staring up at it, realizing her favorite weapon, utility access, was now useless. She pulled out her phone and started dialing: city, towing, anybody. But a generator classified as protected medical infrastructure doesn't move because an HOA president throws a tantrum. And Karen didn't know that yet. She was about to learn it in the worst possible way, on camera, in front of the entire neighborhood, because at 8 a.m., when the sun hit the stucco walls and the street filled with residents coming outside to see why their block looked like an emergency zone, Marcus was going to read Karen her real consequences, not HOA consequences, federal ones. And the moment Karen opened her mouth to order the truck away, a black SUV was going to pull up with someone stepping out who didn't care about community standards, someone who only cared about crimes. And Karen was going to realize that the game she'd been playing, paperwork, fines, intimidation, had finally crossed into the kind of world that doesn't end with emails. It ends with handcuffs. At 8:02 a.m., the entire street felt different. Not quiet different, heavy different. The 53-foot generator truck sat in front of the utility access like a steel monument, diesel engine rumbling low and steady, emergency strobes reflecting off beige stucco homes. The kind of machine you see outside hospitals during hurricanes, not in a tidy HOA neighborhood with matching mailboxes. Karen stepped out of her front door in a silk robe and designer sunglasses. Even though the sun was barely up, she stopped dead. Her driveway was partially blocked, the utility shed was completely blocked, and the reason was obvious. The truck wasn't parked randomly, it was positioned with purpose. Marcus stood near the generator technician, arms folded, calm in a way that unsettled people more than shouting ever could. "What is this?" Karen demanded, voice already rising. The technician, Dave, didn't even look annoyed. He looked bored. "Hospital-grade emergency medical backup system," he said, checking a clipboard. "Protected infrastructure. Cannot be relocated without federal authorization." Karen blinked. "This is a residential community," Dave shrugged. "And that's a veteran on life support, which makes this legally protected." More doors opened. Neighbors stepped outside in slippers, coffee mugs in hand, phones already recording. The entire block gathered like they could sense history being made. Karen marched toward Marcus. "You can't park industrial equipment here." Marcusy smiled slightly. "Actually, I can." He held up a document, original property deed, Medical utility easement. Federal disability accommodation notice. Should complaint case number already filed. Karen's jaw tightened. This is harassment, she snapped. You're destroying property values. That's when Mrs. Patterson, the retired nurse, stepped forward from the crowd. No, she said calmly. Cutting power to a man's oxygen machine was harassment. A ripple of agreement moved through the neighbors. Karen tried to pivot. This equipment is loud. It's disruptive. It violates community standards. Marcus took a slow step closer. Community standards don't override federal disability protections. He let that sentence hang in the air. Then he added quietly, You triggered those protections when you cut his power. The crowd shifted. People whispered. Karen's confidence flickered. She tried another angle. I was preventing a fire hazard. Right on cue, Mr. Kowalski walked forward, holding a small portable speaker. I think everyone should hear something, he said. He pressed play. Karen's voice came through clearly. Make sure the power cut looks accidental. We can't have documentation of intentional sabotage. The silence that followed was nuclear. Even the generator seemed quieter. Karen's face drained of color. That's taken out of context, she said quickly. Really? Kowalski replied. Because I have 3 more recordings. Someone in the back muttered, Oh my God. And that was the moment Karen realized she had lost the room. But she wasn't done making mistakes. She turned to the small crowd and raised her voice. These people are turning our homes into medical facilities. Do you want to live next to a nursing home? That sentence killed her, because at that exact moment, a black SUV rolled slowly onto the street. No sirens, no drama, just authority. The door opened. A woman stepped out in a dark suit. Credentials. Visible at her belt, FBI Phoenix Field Office. The crowd parted instinctively. Karen froze. Agent Sterling walked directly toward her. Ms. Pemberton. Karen swallowed. Yes? We've received a federal civil rights complaint regarding interference with life-sustaining medical equipment. Karen tried to straighten her posture. This is an HOA matter. No, the agent replied calmly. It's not. The generator rumbled behind them like punctuation. You are not to approach any resident's utility connection, Agent Sterling continued. You are not to contact any household using medical equipment. And you are not to interfere with federally protected emergency infrastructure. Karen's voice trembled slightly now. This is ridiculous. The agent didn't raise her tone. Intentional disruption of life support equipment can constitute felony assault under federal law, especially when the individual is a protected veteran. The word veteran hit harder this time, because now it wasn't coming from Marcus. It was coming from a badge. The neighbors began filming openly. Karen looked around for support. She found none. Even the board members who had stood beside her during the power cut avoided eye contact. Marcus spoke again, but his voice was steady. You thought this was about landscaping. He gestured toward the generator. This is about making sure you never touch his power again. Karen's breathing changed. Not panic yet, but close. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling my attorney. Agent Sterling nodded. That would be wise. The generator technician suddenly increased the load output for testing. The sound deepened. A powerful mechanical hum rolled through the street. Streetlights flickered as the generator demonstrated its full capacity. Dave called. Out casually, systems capable of powering the entire block if needed. Several neighbors looked impressed. Karen looked trapped because the positioning of the truck wasn't random. It blocked direct access to the utility shed and partially blocked Karen's own driveway, legally parked, medically justified, untouchable. She was boxed in by a machine she couldn't find, by federal law she couldn't override, by neighbors who no longer believed her. The psychological shift was visible. Karen wasn't in control anymore. She wasn't the authority. She was the liability. And then came the final blow. Mrs. Garcia stepped forward. An older woman who had driven in that morning after hearing what happened. She held a folder thick with court documents. I recognize her, Garcia said loudly. Karen's eyes widened. This woman did the same thing in my neighborhood. She opened the folder and showed the stamped federal judgment. Disability discrimination. Systematic harassment of elderly residents. Forced sales below market value. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen shook her head. That case was settled. You declared bankruptcy to avoid paying, Garcia replied. The agent turned slowly toward Karen. Is that accurate? Karen's silence answered for her. Marcus watched it all unfold with surgical calm. He didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He simply stood there knowing something Karen had just learned the hard way. Power isn't control. Documentation is. By 10 a.m., the street looked like a news segment. Someone had called a local reporter. Cameras captured the generator, captured Karen's expression, captured Agent Sterling explaining that federal protections for disabled veterans override HOA restrictions, captured neighbors speaking openly about harassment. Karen tried to leave. She couldn't. Her car was boxed in. She had to ask the generator technician. To move the truck slightly, he checked his paperwork slowly. Ma'am, I can adjust after medical clearance confirmation. She stood there, humiliated, waiting for permission from a diesel engine. By afternoon, Karen's email inbox was flooded. Board members demanded emergency discussion. Residents demanded explanation. The HOA Facebook group, once Karen's propaganda tool, turned against her completely. That night, she didn't host a meeting. She hid. The next morning, a lawyer's letter arrived. Karen Pemberton resigned as HOA president effective immediately. No dramatic speech, no apology, just legal language and a signature. But it didn't end there. Because once the FBI investigation expanded, they began examining. Financial ties, patterns emerged, below-market property purchases, referral payments, communications with a real estate firm specializing in community demographic transition. 3 previous residents in Willowbrook had sold quietly under pressure. The Leywall pressure had a name, Karen. Within weeks, subpoenas were issued. Financial records were pulled. The real estate company cut ties fast. And Karen's house, the largest corner lot overlooking the park, went into foreclosure. Neighbors watched the "for sale" sign go up with a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. The woman who claimed to protect property values had destroyed her own. The HOA held a special election. Marcus didn't want the role, but the neighbors insisted. He agreed on one condition: permanent medical accommodation protection written into the covenant. No future board could restrict oxygen machines, wheelchairs, dialysis equipment, or medical deliveries. The vote passed almost unanimously. The generator stayed for a week, not because it was needed constantly, but because it sent a message. You do not weaponize utilities against vulnerable people. When it finally left, the street felt quiet again, but not the same quiet, a different one, safer. Ezra came home from the hospital 3 days later, weak but stable. When Marcus explained what had happened, the old veteran listened quietly. Then he nodded once. "Never let bullies think they're in charge," he said softly. The oxygen concentrator hummed steadily beside him. That sound, once a trigger for harassment, now sounded like victory. Months later, Willowbrook Heights had a reputation, not for strict rules, for protecting veterans, for protecting families, for not tolerating petty tyrants. Karen's name became a cautionary tale. Whenever someone tried to overreach, neighbors would say quietly, "Don't go full Karen." And somewhere in Phoenix, a former HOA president learned something the hard way. You can fine someone for trees, you can complain about trucks, you can measure lawns and send violation letters. But the moment you decide oxygen is optional, you stop being an HOA president. You become evidence. And if you've made it this far, ask yourself something honestly. If someone tried to cut power to your grandfather's life support over a landscaping fine, what would you have done? Because sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to outpower them, legally, strategically, and permanently.